People think strength is a reward, something that makes life easier. Something that brings respect, admiration, and loyalty. But that's a lie told by the weak, because they've never seen what strength really costs. The truth is simple. The stronger you become, the more alone you will be. Not because you're unloved, not because you're unwanted, but because most people can't breathe at the altitude you live at. The weak gather. They move in herds. They need validation, comfort, softness, noise. They need to be understood. They need to be held. But the strong, they walk where others can't. They carry what others refuse to touch. They're forced to become their own comfort, their own army, their own reason to continue. That's why the strong don't suffer because they're alone. They suffer because no one else is built to walk beside them. Leonidas died with 300, but he lived alone. Achilles was worshipped by armies, but no one understood his rage. Alexander conquered the world and wept because no one else could match his hunger. That's the pattern. The greater the mind, the heavier the crown, the colder the air. Weak men want company. Strong men want truth. And truth is a solitary currency. You can't be powerful and popular at the same time. You can't rise above the world and still expect the world to understand you. You can't lead and still fit in. You don't conquer and get comfort as a bonus prize. Power isolates. Ambition isolates. Discipline isolates. Vision isolates. Because every step higher on the mountain is one step further away from the campfire, where the ordinary keep each other warm. The strong suffer alone because they cannot share the weight. They carry expectations, pressure, responsibility, the burden of control. People admire the throne. No one volunteers to feel its weight. The strong aren't abandoned. They're unmatched. That's why they suffer. You can test this. Tell someone your fears. They'll stay. Tell someone your dreams. They'll disappear. People can handle weakness, but not magnitude. They'll comfort your wounds, but they'll resent your power. That's why the strong learn silence. That's why kings stop explaining. That's why warriors stop asking for help. That's why thinkers keep their thoughts. Not because they don't have something to say, but because they know no one is ready to hear it. The world is full of people who want to be around strength, but not beneath it. They want the fire, but not the burn. They want the success story, not the scars that wrote it. They want a lion, but only if it purrs like a house cat. So the strong retreat, not into sadness, into sovereignty. Isolation becomes a forge. Loneliness becomes a test. Silence becomes a weapon. Because when no one is left to rely on, you finally meet the version of you that doesn't need anyone. And that's the most dangerous version of a man. The weak suffer socially. The strong suffer internally. But the strong transform that suffering into fuel, vision, and dominance. That's why their loneliness doesn't break them. It sharpens them. Every great leader, warrior, thinker, king, or god from history had this in common. They reached a place where no one could follow, not because no one loved them, but because no one else could survive there. The strong are feared because they need no one. The weak are loved because they need everyone. But love built on need is dependency. Fear built on strength is respect. Ask yourself, which one survives when the world collapses? So if you feel alone, if you feel misunderstood, if you feel like no one sees what you carry, good. It means you're rising. It means you're separating. It means you're crossing the line between ordinary and inevitable. The path of strength is not crowded. It is narrow. It is brutal. And it is silent. But at the end of it, you don't become accepted. You become unforgettable. The strong suffer alone, but they rise alone. They build alone. They reign alone. And when the world finally sees what they've become, it doesn't ask who helped him. It asks, how did he do it? Because gods are not born in crowds. They are born in isolation, and the world only worships them. Once it's too late to stand beside them, there is another reason the strong suffer alone. Because strength is not just what you carry, it is what you outgrow. The higher you ride, the more people around you start to feel small. Not because you shrink them, but because they refuse to grow. And when people can't grow with you, they'll do something else. They'll turn against you, not openly, not with swords, but with doubts, with distance, with subtle resentment. They won't say, you're too strong. Instead, they'll say, you've changed. You think you're better. You're different now. Good. You're supposed to be. Weakness worships familiarity. Strength destroys it. That's why the strong don't lose people. They simply out-evolve them. You won't be betrayed because you're wrong. You'll be betrayed because you remind them of what they never became. And that's the kind of loneliness no one talks about. The loneliness of being hated for the very thing people once admired in you. People cheer for strength when it entertains them. They abandon it when it exposes them. They love the warrior until he shows them their cowardice. They love the disciplined until they have to face their own laziness. They love the leader until he no longer needs them. That's why the strong stop trying to be understood. They stop explaining. They stop convincing. They learn a silent truth. The higher you climb, the smaller your audience becomes, until there's no one left but you and your will. The strong don't suffer because no one supports them. They suffer because no one matches them. When you think differently, you lose the company of the average. When you work differently, you lose the company of the comfortable. When you live by standards instead of feelings, you lose the company of the distracted. And the strong don't beg people to stay. They let them go. Because you cannot carry destiny if you're also carrying everyone's approval. Some people suffer loneliness because they're broken. The strong suffer loneliness because they're becoming unbreakable. Isolation is not a punishment. It is a transition. It is the space between who you were and who you're about to become. Even gods had to walk into the wilderness before they were worshipped. Moses had the desert. Buddha had the Bodhi tree. Nietzsche had madness. Leonidas had the hot gates. Every king, every prophet, every conqueror had a chapter of solitude so brutal that it crushed everything weak inside them and left only one thing standing: purpose. Loneliness is not the enemy of the strong. It is the forge that makes them undefeatable. Because when you finally learn to survive without applause, you become impossible to stop. When you no longer need need to be understood. You become impossible to manipulate. When you stop depending on the world, you become the kind of force the world must respond to. That's why the strong suffer alone. Because solitude is the price of self-sufficiency. And here's the final truth. The strong don't stay alone forever, but they must walk alone long enough to become someone worth standing beside. Because real allies don't follow you because they need you. They follow because they recognize you. Not the mask, not the noise, but the fire. So if you're in the dark right now, if you're quiet, distant, withdrawn, rebuilding, if no one understands what you're doing, or why you're obsessed, or why you walked away from everything average, good, it means you're not declining, you're ascending. Every lion walks alone before it becomes a king. Every king is crowned long before the world sees the throne. Isolation is not exile, it is evolution. So yes, the strong suffer alone, but they rise higher. They see further. They feel deeper. They outlast everyone who doubted them. And one day, the same world that ignored them will name monuments after them, because history was never written by the crowd. It was written by the man who stood apart from it. The strong suffer alone, but the weak suffer forever.